second grand jury that they seated, and they indicted him on child endangerment charges because he took the switch to his 4-year-old kid. He's not denying it. Not only is he not denying it, he's standing up saying he cooperated with the authorities, and he said, hey, this is the way I was raised, and this is the way I'm going to raise my son. The Vikings said, look, we're going to deactivate him, and then we're going to find out what's going on because this is the first we're hearing about it. So the Minnesota Vikings played and didn't play very well. The Patriots beat them bad yesterday. But now we sort of live in a world where last week we were talking about domestic violence and men hitting women. And now we're talking about men hitting young babies, a 4-year-old. Before we get to phone calls and before we get to my thoughts on this, Chris Carter said something really interesting yesterday. He was on ESPN, and Chris Carter is a Hall of Famer, and he said this about child abuse.
My mom did the best job she could do, raising 7 kids by herself. But there are thousands of things that I have learned since then that my mom was wrong.
Yes. Thank you.
It's the 21st century. My mom was wrong. She did the best she could, but she was wrong about some of that stuff she taught me. And I promise my kids I won't teach that mess to them. You can't be the kid to make them do what they want to do.
That's correct. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thousands of things we have learned since then. And now we're to the point, the only thing I'm proud about is the team that I played for. They did the right thing.
Yes.
Take them off the field. I don't care what. We in a climate right now, I don't care what it is. Take them off the dang on field. Because you know what? As a man, that's the only thing we really respect. We don't respect no women. We don't respect no kids. The only thing Roger and them do, take them off the field. Because they respect that.
Unlike
Adam Schefter now joins.
Unlike last week, where nobody came to Ray Rice's defense, right? Nobody said, well, it's justified sometimes, right? Nobody said that. But with this Adrian Peterson, people are coming to his defense. People are coming to his defense saying, hey, wait a minute, it's okay. Now, before I got the full story on this on Friday, when I first heard about this, and I heard that he said, hey, this is the way I was brought up, and this is the way I want to bring up my children, I thought to myself, this is going to be interesting because this is more nuanced than just a video of a man hitting a woman, knocking her out in an elevator, right? This is. So I want to know how old the kid was. What did the kid do? Is the kid, on the wrong road? Is he hanging out with the wrong people? Is he dealing drugs? Remember the story was it last summer, where the mother took a baseball bat or tried to hit the kid because the kid was still selling drugs to her son? Right? And she was at her wit's end, and she didn't know what else to do. If your son comes home and he's addicted to heroin, and he's robbed you blind, and you sent him to rehab, and at some point I could see you raising your hand to him saying, what else is there to do? Not that that would solve the problem, but you could certainly see it. So I wanted to know, how old's the kid? What was he doing? And then I found out the kid was 4 years old. And I thought to myself, where is it in the world? In what argument can you say the 4-year-old did what to deserve the beating? What is it that because people are still supporting Adrian Peterson. They're saying, hey, I was beat. It's okay under certain circumstances. Okay, fine. What circumstances is it acceptable for an adult, for a 220-pound adult, to take a switch or a hand or a mallet or a paddle to a 4-year-old or a belt? That was the object. That was the object of choice in my family. It was and I've joked about this in the past. That wooden paddle with that stupid rubber ball and that stupid rubber band that was attached to it by a stapler. right? And you'd hit it, you go boom, boom, boom. It was like a little paddle and a ball, right? And you do it 3 times, and the ball would come off of the stapled rubber band, and then for the next 6 months, it was used as a paddle to beat us with. Only then did we hide it so that they couldn't find it. And then some adult would bring over another one. Oh, kids, hey, how'd you like to play with this? It was like, no, don't bring that. No. It was belts. It was a slap. It was the back of the hand, and it was those wooden paddles. And look, I'm not saying I've done shows where I've said, what did your parents do to you that would get them arrested today? And we joke about it. I mean, not to mention, no seatbelts, no car seats. What are you talking car seats? What are you talking about? Car seats. What about smoking during pregnancy and drinking during pregnancy? And hey, when women used to give birth back in the day, they'd hand you the baby and they'd say, hey, would you like a cigarette? And so you were smoking in the hospital with the baby in your arms. Not to mention all the other things. But again, what is it like pornography? I can't explain it, but I know it when I see it. 314-969-KTRS, 1-888-550-KTRS, or star KTRS. Those are the phone numbers. Terry and Arnold, you're first up. Welcome to KTRS.
Good morning, McGraw.
Morning, Terry.
You got to look at the whole situation. Did this guy beat the kid because he was angry? Was he just wailing on the kid? Well, there's a proper way to discipline a child with a rod. And the Bible says, spare the rod, spoil the child. And I was taught many years ago by the pastor where I go to church at how to properly discipline a child using a rod. Now, we didn't use no baseball bat. We used a 1/4 inch, 3/16 rod, three foot long. And the purpose of the length is that if you swung too hard, you broke it. You broke the rod, you didn't break the child. And all the rod does is inflict a stinging pain on their rear end, in which causes them to utterly say, I don't want to ever do that again, because the pain associated with doing wrong was more intense.
David, do you believe in everything the Bible says? Terry, do you believe everything that the Bible says?
Yes.
Including don't touch pigskin on Sundays and all that type of stuff? I mean, are you a literalist?
Well, as much as I can. In today's society doesn't even look at the Bible as real. And you're walking on that line right now, McGraw. You're walking on that line right now.
How am I walking on what line am I walking on?
Well, you're saying, am I a realist? Do I believe everything in the Bible? I do believe the Bible. I believe everything in the Bible.
Okay.
But the thing about it is, today, and it's a different day in which we live in. I understand that, and I hate some days I forget stuff and I have to go to the store and get something. I absolutely hate it. I drive a bus on Sunday mornings. I go out Saturday night and I fuel the bus up.
But there are all sorts of people who there are Orthodox Jews that sort of live their life according to their beliefs and not to the 21st century. There are all sorts of religions, but you can't pick and choose. You say you're not a literalist. Because I
don't practice the Bible 100%. I'm still working. I'm a work in progress. I'll be a work in progress until I die, McGraw. At least I'm doing something. There's people who do nothing.
What is it that a 4-year-old can do that deserves welts and blood to be drawn?
Well, like I said, now he went too far. Like I said, he went too far. There's nothing that a 4-year-old did that would deserve to be beaten to the point where he's bloody, broken bones, any of that stuff. But you know what? When you use a rod properly and you hit a child on a buttocks area like you're supposed to, yes, a little welt does form, and that's all because that when they touch it, it still hurts, and it's a stinging sensation.
So when should you use the rod? At what age should you use the rod?
When they understand when they understand when right and wrong. And at
They understand
4-year-old,
between
they
right
know
and wrong.
right from wrong.
They
And
do
you
know
tell
right
a
from
child,
wrong.
don't do this, and they continuously do it.
So, so for example, like what? They don't clean up their room?
No. There's children. Children. The Bible even says that
Don't get
children
mad
come
at
out of
me.
the
I'm
womb
asking
lying.
you a question. What in which circumstance should you use the rod on a 4-year-old?
Well, that everybody's supposed to use their own discretion. There's not one rule that applies to everybody.
Okay, what
You're
about you?
supposed to use. Pardon me?
What about you?
Well, let's see. When my child lied to me. Now, every enforcement, the punishment was, I spanked my child. I used the rod at least twice on their bottom.
Mm-hmm.
That's all, just twice.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. I didn't take no full swings because when they're younger, just a little pop on the bottom got their attention when they were 2, 3. And then, as they get older, their sins progress and they become more sophisticated in their lives and their ways of deceitfulness. Same as you and I.
Terry, I got to run. Thanks for the phone call.
Yeah.
925, Big 550, KTRS. Nancy, Lynn, everybody else, hold on. Charles, we'll get all your thoughts coming up here. 920 and sweet so we can get to as many as possible. Let's go to DePere and check in with Nancy. Nancy, you're on KTRS Radio.
Oh, yes. Well, you were speaking about nuancing, and I think that needs to be part of this discussion also. When I hear that so-and-so or whatever had beaten their kid, that brings a picture to mind that's really ugly and scary. Now, many times we give them a swat on the behind or a kick on the leg or a paddle on the leg or whatever. There's all kinds of variations. Some I think are legitimate. It's just an impulse thing. One of mine went out in the middle of the street one time. I grabbed him by the arm and gave him a swat on the butt as we headed for the sidewalk. That just reinforced, no, not in the street.
Mm-hmm.
And variations, but there's a lot of big bruisers and big folks that have so much power, and they're so frustrated, and maybe they're in a violent game that they play, and their reactions are always impulsive and powerful. And so, certainly beating a child of any age is not acceptable.
Nancy,
and when you use that word, there's only one view that comes into your head. But there are gradations, and the nuancing that you spoke about, and violence and
Nancy,
severe damage is certainly not acceptable.
Nancy,
and that's all I have to say about that.
Nancy, thanks for the phone call.
All right, bye.
You know what? I have a dog, and I've been watching some of these dog videos about how to train a dog. And when the dog runs into the street, you know what they tell you? They don't tell you to yell at the dog. They don't tell you to yell at the dog. When the dog does poo in the house or pees in the house, they don't tell you to yell at the dog. They don't tell you to hit the dog. They don't tell. So the kid does poo in his diapers. Are you supposed to hit the kid? If the kid runs out on the street, you're supposed to hit the kid. But all the experts say don't hit the dog, but you're supposed to hit the kid. Charles in St. Louis, you're on KTRS.
Morning.
Morning, Charles. Thanks for calling.
Good morning.
Good morning, Charles.
Yes, I want to say that I experienced being what we call it whip. We got a whipping when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I got whipped with extension cords, ironing cords, whatever was at hand. And I also got punished at school. They used a rattan on us. They bent us over a chair or a desk, and they applied the rattan to our butts.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what that taught me later on in life was they were trying to protect me from being shot down in the streets. Now, these kids today, you're not allowed, the parents aren't allowed to discipline them. The teachers aren't allowed to discipline them, so they don't get any discipline. They think that they can do whatever they want to do when it comes in their mind to do it. That you can't have children thinking like that. And children or dogs, they're supposed to have more sense than animals. So you holler at them to keep them from getting run over in the streets or shot down in the streets.
But Charles,
I want to talk about fairness.
Yes.
Everybody got their butts whipped, and we all the children knew the ones that deserved it, and when they got it, no one had anything to say because it was administered fairly. What I have a problem with is that they want to hang this guy for clocking his woman in the elevator, and she later married him. But the police officer who is trained and taking an oath to protect and serve can sit on a woman's chest in the middle of the highway and left and right her and pound her head into the pavement and How come he's not investigated? Was that his first time doing something like that? Is that a behavior that he always does? It was just captured on camera? These questions are never asked in the news, and I wonder why.
Charles, thanks for the phone call. That is completely off topic. I'm sure we'll get to that at some point. Lynn in St. Louis, you're on KTRS.
Hi. I guess I sort of agree with what he was saying. I was just thinking about, first off, what you're talking about is really not right. Okay, so we all agree with that. But I think if we swing it a little too far the other way, maybe that's part of this Normandy discipline issue and things like that, because I didn't get beat at home. But there was always that, illusion that your parents had that power or that the teacher could do something. And I know when we were kids, we knew if you did something really bad, as long as you did it before 17, you wouldn't be tried as an adult. So, I mean, I don't know. I just think that we don't want to go too far the other way.
Lynn, I think it's like pornography.
Yeah.
I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
Right.
Right? I mean, I'm with you. I don't know about you. I was beaten, and I'm sure that if there was a social worker somewhere around, that a social worker would have raised an eyebrow or two. Now, does that mean that I'm somehow scarred? No. But in this 21st century world, I'm sure some people would have called that into question. Going forward, though, this guy left welts on a 4-year-old.
Yeah, see, that's
I mean, he drew blood on a 4-year-old. What does a 4-year-old do that deserves something like that?
So that brings into play that there's these organizations out there. If you really do feel like you're about to lose it, you need to walk away. And if you really are having some issues trying to deal with stuff, that's when you need to call in some help. I mean, there are some resources out there. People just aren't always aware of it. And
Right.
even if you're a professional football player, maybe you need some help dealing with some of the craziness kids can put you through.
Well, and this stick, if it's 3 inches long and it's only 2.25 circumference wide, here's a 220-pound man. My father was a giant, right? I mean, he was a giant. When I was a little boy, my father was a giant, and even though he wasn't around very often, he didn't have a mean bone in his body. He never raised his hand, but I could only imagine if he thought about raising his hand, I would have, he would have taken my head off.
My mom was 5'11" and a half. She would never say 6 foot. So we're not talking a tiny woman here.
Right.
But it was just she had that illusion. But my husband's mom was a tiny woman, and he was the youngest of 6, and that was her regular discipline way. She just didn't know any other way to do it.
Yeah, no, but I think, we've also progressed a little bit, I think, right? I mean, just because our parents did it doesn't mean that it's right.
Oh, well, and that's interesting because my husband is very mellow in terms of it, which is interesting knowing his background. You know what I mean? I think he almost tries over.
Right, goes the other way. Lynn, thanks for the phone call.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
You got it. I want to get to Karen in Cotterville. Karen, you're on KTRS Radio.
Hi.
Hi.
I have adopted a child that's been the product of having corporal punishment, and he suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder from the environment that he was in. I mean, he's a little kid and suffers with nightmares of the intimidation and physical violence of being beaten. And the thing is, people just have to understand we have better ways of dealing there. When you know better, you do better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because there are better ways of managing issues, kids are smarter than we give them credit for, and a parent has to be held to a standard within themselves of, hey, I'm not going to react out of anger, frustration, tiredness, anxiety, stress from my job. I have to say, this 4-year-old or whatever age, he's trying to figure out the world around him. He's trying to test the boundaries to see what's safe. Are you going to take care of me if I act in this risky behavior? And it's the adult's job to be able to say, wow, that was really dumb what my kid just did. I have to take 5 seconds to think about what I want him to take away or her from this situation, and not act out of. It's easy. It is much easier to react instead of to act
Right.
once you've had 5 seconds of thinking through things.
Well,
And I think that's where parents get into trouble. Is
I would think in the 21st century, what's worse than a kid would rather be beaten than have his PlayStation taken away from him.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, I'll go, beat me, just don't take my iPhone away from me.
Yeah.
So Karen in God's country, otherwise known as Cotterville. Thanks for checking in, Karen.
Well, thank you. Have a good day.
You got it. 9:38 here. Big 550
Everyone's got
KTRS. Unlike the Ray Rice story from last week, nobody came out and said, "Hey, beating a wife in some circumstances is acceptable." The outrage was the NFL reacted to the outrage. In this instance, with Adrian Peterson, the outrage is there are many people who are coming to the defense of Adrian Peterson. Let's go to Marilyn. Marilyn, you're on the Big 550 KTRS.
Good morning. I just want to make one statement.
Sure.
Children are little people, and we need to treat them as such. We don't solve a conflict with our coworkers or our friends by hitting them or punishing them that way. Is this what we're teaching our children when we punish them by hitting them? That this is the way to solve problems? I think not. I think there are other, better ways to discipline and teach a child. That's my comment.
Marilyn, thanks for the phone call. Appreciate it. Thanks for checking in. She brings up a really good point, and she also brings up a point that just because it happened to us doesn't mean that it's okay to spend off, right? Ray Rice, they say, many abusers were abused. So how do you think Ray Rice, I don't know for sure, but I know his father was murdered at some point, and I don't know his background other than that. So I'm kind of talking out of my ear here. But they say that abusers were abused. So maybe Ray Rice was abused as a child. Now, some say he was disciplined. Others say he's abused. Where does that line? I don't know where that line is. It's different on each person, which is why it's so hard for society to sort of figure all this out. But you know what? If you're going around smacking kids every time he spills milk or every time he's, loses the remote or, picks on his sister or doesn't go to bed on time or, doesn't do exactly, doesn't clean up his room, you start smacking the kid around, guess what? All of a sudden he becomes abused. So he grows up. So then the girl says to him something, he can't handle it. So what does he do? He raises his hand to the girl. So it's not, these two topics are not separate topics. That Ray Rice, the abuser, and Adrian Peterson, the person who is slapping the kid around. This kid grows up, and hey, that's the way I was taught. Hey, I saw my daddy slap my mom around. Therefore, it's acceptable. Just because your parents did it doesn't mean that it's acceptable. And that's why I think Chris Carter's comments are so insightful and so impassioned and so dead on. Is that he's basically saying, look, I love my mother. My mother did the best she could. We had 7 kids, and it was a crazy time. He says, but not everything she did was right. And we're supposedly more advanced than we are from 20 years ago, from 30 years ago, from 40 years ago. And so guess what? The mother is upset. She's worried. She's worried about the next paycheck. She's worried about her husband. She's worried about this. All of a sudden, she's, starts smacking the kid around, and all the kid did was, spill the milk. The kid didn't listen. Do you really have to go to the rod, if you will, if the kid's not listening? Have we not advanced to the part where you can't out-negotiate a 4-year-old kid, so you got to take him out back and whack him a couple times? Marilyn's point is well taken. If there's a coworker, Andrew, who's not listening to you and not doing what you say, I can't take him out back and slap him around, though I'd like to from time to time. I'm kind of joking, but I'm serious about this. There are many, many things our parents did years ago that would get them arrested today, including welts and blood and everything else to Adrian Peterson's kid. This one, though, is much more nuanced and much more different than the Ray Rice. But how does Ray Rice get to be? How do abusers get to be abusers? Chances are they were abused as a kid. 948 here, Big 550 KTRS. American